Imagine this for a second. You are floating on the Pacific Ocean. No land in sight, no sound but water moving under you. Just an endless surface of blue, stretching so far it almost stops feeling real. Above you, the sky is clear. Below you, the ocean drops into a darkness so deep it doesn't feel like a place anymore. And right here, on this thin, shifting line between sky and abyss, something is happening. Something you've never noticed. A single drop of water is about to leave the ocean. It doesn't explode. It doesn't rise dramatically. There's no moment where you could point and say, "There it goes." 1 second, it belongs to the sea. The next, it doesn't. It simply lets go. Lifted by nothing more than warmth, it drifts upward. Invisible now, weightless, gone from the surface without anyone ever noticing. And yet this is the beginning of something enormous. Not just a movement through air, but a journey that will touch almost everything on Earth. The ocean doesn't react. It keeps moving like nothing changed. Waves continue breaking, folding, disappearing again, as if nothing was ever taken. But something was. Something very small that will not stay small for long in what it's about to become. Higher up, the air is different, slightly colder, slightly quieter. The kind of quiet you only notice when you've left something behind. The droplet doesn't know that yet. It just keeps rising, carried by invisible currents that never stop moving around the planet. At first, it's gentle, a slow drift above the waves. Seagulls cut through the air below it. The smell of salt still feels close enough to touch. The ocean is still there, but it's already starting to feel distant. Then the climb changes. Not suddenly, but enough that you notice it if you were paying attention. The air gets thinner, colder, wider. Space itself feels less crowded. Far below, the warm ocean keeps absorbing sunlight that has traveled millions of kilometers just to reach it. Most of that energy becomes heat, but a small part of it is doing something else entirely. It's breaking water free, one molecule at a time, again and again, across every sea, lake, river, and wet surface on Earth. And this one droplet is part of that silent exchange. It leaves the surface without resistance, no sound, no trace, just a shift from liquid to something you can no longer see. Now it rises faster, pulled into a larger movement in the atmosphere. Air doesn't stand still, it circulates, folds, returns, and climbs again in patterns that cover the entire planet. The droplet doesn't choose any of this, it just follows what everything around it is already doing. The higher it goes, the colder it becomes. Warm ocean below, cooling sky above. A quiet gradient stretching between two worlds. And somewhere in that transition, something begins to change again. The droplet slows, not because it stops moving, but because it starts becoming something else. Tiny particles float around it, dust, salt, fragments carried across continents, invisible anchors in the sky, and the droplet begins to gather, not as one, but as many becoming one again. A cloud is forming,
Not a shape you could point to, not a thing with edges, just a growing presence in the air where water begins to remember itself. From the ground, it would look soft, almost harmless. But inside, it is motion without rest, droplets drifting, colliding, separating, recombining, nothing holding still, everything in transition. And somewhere inside this growing cloud, our journey is only beginning. For a while, the journey feels almost gentle. The cloud moves without resistance, drifting across an endless sky. Below it, the ocean slowly fades into the distance, as if it were never the starting point at all. What began over open water is now crossing something new: land. From this height, the earth reveals itself in quiet detail. Coastlines trace long, imperfect edges between sea and soil. Forests spread across valleys like dark green waves frozen in motion. Rivers twist through the land, pulling memory of rain back toward the ocean. And mountains rise above everything else, breaking through the clouds like stone islands in a white sea. Our droplet doesn't know any of this. It has no sense of direction, no map, no idea that it is part of anything larger than itself. It simply moves with the air, carried wherever the sky decides to take it. But nothing in the atmosphere is ever truly random. Every cloud is part of a system far bigger than what can be seen in a single moment. A circulation that has been repeating for as long as the planet had air and oceans. Warm air rises, cool air sinks. The Earth's rotation bends these movements into vast, invisible patterns that wrap around the globe. Storms are born from them, winds travel through them. Heat is constantly redistributed, as if the planet is quietly balancing itself without pause. And now this particular cloud is approaching something it cannot simply pass through: a mountain range. At lower altitudes, the air was warm enough to keep everything suspended. But mountains change that. They force air upward. There is no way around them, only over. As the cloud reaches the rising slopes, it begins to climb, slowly at first, then with growing pressure. Upward currents strengthen as the terrain pushes everything higher into colder layers of the atmosphere. Inside the cloud, the droplets begin to change. Collisions become more frequent. Some merge, some separate again. But a few begin to grow larger than the rest, just slightly at first, almost unnoticeable. Yet in a system like this, small differences matter. Larger droplets attract more water. Each collision makes them heavier. Each increase in size makes the next collision more likely. A quiet chain reaction begins to form. And somewhere in that growing imbalance, our traveler changes. It is no longer just a trace of vapor, no longer suspended without effort. It is becoming heavy enough for gravity to notice again. At first, the rising air still holds it, a temporary balance between upward force and downward pull. But that balance cannot last forever. Eventually, it breaks. The droplet can no longer remain suspended, and for the first time since it left the ocean, it begins to fall. The descent starts softly, almost uncertain, as if the sky is letting go rather than pushing it down. Then it accelerates. Around it, countless other droplets begin the same release from the cloud, though none of them share the same path. Some will end in rivers, some in lakes, some on stone, some on leaves. No two journeys will end in the same way. Our droplet moves downward through shifting air. Wind pushes it sideways. Currents scatter it briefly before gravity pulls it back into line. The world below grows clearer with every second. The forest appears first as a texture, then as a structure, then as individual trees, then as moving branches shaped by wind and rain. The canopy rises to meet it. Leaves sharpen into focus. Water already resting on their surfaces trembles with each new impact from above. And then, after everything it has passed through, the droplet arrives. Not in a river, not in the ocean, but on a single leaf, high above the forest floor. The impact is almost nothing, a soft contact, a brief pause in motion, then stillness. For the first time in its entire journey, it is not moving. Rain continues around it. The storm passes overhead, speaking in the language of water and wind. Leaves shake under countless similar arrivals. Some droplets slip away immediately, continuing downward toward the ground. Others gather, merge, and fall again. But this one remains, resting on the edge of a leaf, balanced between falling and staying. Below it, the forest floor waits in shadow. Above it, the sky begins to open again, the storm slowly drifting onward, as if nothing important has changed. And yet, something has, because here, at this quiet pause in motion, the next part of the journey is no longer in the sky. It is below it.
Morning arrives slowly. The storm is gone. The forest feels different now, quieter, heavier, as if it is still remembering what just passed through it. Light begins to filter down through the canopy in broken pieces. Not full sunlight yet, just scattered gold slipping between leaves high above. For a while, nothing moves. Our droplet is still there, resting on the edge of a leaf like it has always belonged there. Small, perfectly still, reflecting the world around it in a curved, trembling shape. Sky above, branches around it, the soft return of warmth into the air. Then the balance changes, not suddenly, just enough to notice if you were watching closely. Gravity begins to matter again. The droplet shifts, slowly at first. It spreads across the surface of the leaf, following paths it doesn't choose, only follows. Tiny veins guide it forward, invisible to anything except touch. It reaches the edge and lets go. It falls, not far, only to another leaf below, then another and another, each drop softer than the last, like the forest is catching it over and over again, instead of letting it hit the ground all at once. There is a name for this. Scientists call it canopy drip. But inside the forest, it doesn't feel like a process. It feels like patience, like the forest is holding on to the rain as long as it can. Some droplets never reach the ground quickly. They move through layers of leaves, branches, and shadows, delayed by everything living around them. Insects drink from them. Frogs rest inside them. Moss slowly absorbs them without ever needing to move. The forest doesn't just receive rain, it reshapes it, slows it down,
breaks it apart, gives it time to become something else before it reaches the earth. Eventually, our droplet makes its way downward, not at once, but step by step through the canopy, until the light changes again. The forest floor is different, cooler, darker, still but not empty, a world hidden beneath the noise of everything above it. A thick layer of fallen leaves covers the ground like a memory no one is reading anymore. But underneath that layer, nothing is idle. Everything is working. Fungi stretch through the soil in invisible networks. Beetles move through narrow tunnels. Bacteria break down what used to be alive. Worms slowly turn matter over, grain by grain, without ever being seen doing it. From above, it looks like nothing is happening. But down here, everything is happening at once, just without sound. The droplet touches the soil, and for a moment, it feels like the journey might finally end here. But water rarely accepts endings. It only changes direction. Between the grains of soil, there are spaces too small to notice, but large enough for movement. Tiny pathways shaped by time, pressure, and everything that has passed through here before. The droplet begins to sink, slowly, not falling now, but seeping, as if the ground is gently taking it in. Above, the forest continues its life without interruption. Birds call from branch to branch. Wind moves through leaves. Sunlight shifts across the canopy like nothing below has changed anything above. But down here, everything becomes slower, heavier, older. Time feels different underground. Not measured in moments, but in distance, in how far something can move before it is changed again. The droplet continues downward through narrow passages in the soil, between grains of sand, around fragments of stone, past roots that are always searching without rest. And then, something finds it, not by sight, not by force, but by chemistry, by need. A root, alive beneath the surface, constantly pulling water toward itself in tiny controlled differences of pressure, one molecule at a time, without hesitation, without awareness. The droplet is no longer just passing through soil. It has arrived at a decision point it cannot understand. It could continue deeper, towards underground reservoirs, towards slow-moving waters hidden beneath continents. Or it could become part of something alive. And here, the direction changes. The root draws it in, not violently, not quickly, but completely. The droplet enters the tree, and the journey changes again, because now, for the first time since it left the ocean, it is moving upward.
Inside the tree, the journey changes again. For the first time since it left the ocean, the droplet is no longer being pulled downward, not by gravity, not by falling, but by something else entirely. It is moving upward, quietly, against everything it once followed, into the trunk, into the living structure of one of the oldest systems on Earth, a system that looks simple from the outside, but is anything but. A tree seems still, a trunk, branches, leaves, a shape that does not appear to move. But inside that stillness is motion,
Millions of microscopic pathways running from the deepest roots to the highest leaves. A hidden transport system known as the xylem. This is not a machine. There is no engine, no pump, no heartbeat pushing anything upward. And yet, water rises, hundreds of feet in some of the tallest trees on Earth, silently, constantly, without stopping. For a long time, this was a mystery. How does anything move upward like that without being pushed? The answer is not force, it is connection. Far above, in the leaves, water is escaping into the air. Not visibly, not dramatically, just molecule by molecule, leaving through tiny openings called stomata, a process known as transpiration. And when one molecule leaves, it pulls on the next, and the next. Not by intention, but by physics. Water holds on to itself. It stays connected. And that connection becomes a chain, a pull that travels all the way down the tree. Our droplet is inside that chain now, part of a column of water stretching from soil to sky, being lifted not by a machine, but by the quiet pull of evaporation happening far above. The climb is slow, measured in centimeters, then meters, then distance that feels impossible when you forget what is carrying it. No turbulence, no rush, just a steady upward movement that never announces itself. Along the way, the droplet passes living cells, cells that move nutrients, cells that build structure, cells that keep the tree alive without ever needing to be seen. It passes through wood that is not dead material, but memory. Each ring in the trunk is a record, a year of rain, a year of drought, a year of fire, a year of abundance, layer after layer of time written in silence. Some of these rings existed before cities, before maps, before names were given to places. And now the droplet moves through them, as if time itself has no objection to being crossed. The higher it rises, the brighter the world becomes. Light filters through the structure of the tree. Birds move somewhere above. Wind shifts the outer branches. And finally, the ascent reaches the canopy. Leaves spread out into open sky, swaying gently in air that feels completely different from the ground below. Here, the droplet arrives at its destination, a leaf. Not as an endpoint, but as a transformation. For a brief moment, it becomes part of the leaf itself, helping move nutrients, supporting the quiet process of photosynthesis, participating in one of the most fundamental exchanges on Earth. Because here, sunlight is not just light, it is energy being turned into life, and water is part of that conversion. Then the temperature shifts, slightly, almost imperceptibly. The sun rises higher, the air warms, and at the surface of the leaf, something begins again. A single molecule breaks away, then another, then another. The droplet dissolves, not lost, not destroyed, just released. It becomes vapor once more, invisible, weightless, returning to the sky without resistance. The forest remains below, calm, endless, unaware of the full scale of what has just passed through it. And the droplet rises again, not as liquid, not as form, but as possibility. The cycle feels complete. Ocean, sky, cloud, rain, earth, tree, sky again. But nothing about it is final, because water does not complete journeys, it continues them. And somewhere far away, where the air begins to cool again, a new cloud is already forming.
Not every raindrop returns to the sky within days, or weeks, or even years. Some take a very different path, a path measured not in seasons, but in centuries. As our droplet rises once more into the atmosphere, it finds itself carried farther north. The journey is longer this time. The air is colder. The sun hangs lower in the sky. Far below, forests gradually give way to mountains. The peaks stretch toward the clouds, covered in snow, wrapped in silence. Winter has arrived here long before it reaches the valleys below. And high above these frozen slopes, our droplet enters another cloud. The process feels familiar now. Cooling air, condensation, tiny droplets gathering together. But this time, something is different. The temperature is well below freezing. Instead of becoming liquid, water molecules begin arranging themselves into delicate crystalline structures. A snowflake is born. Its shape is impossibly intricate, six-sided, perfectly symmetrical, yet unlike any snowflake that has ever existed before. Scientists have studied snowflakes for centuries. Despite their endless variety, every one follows the same basic geometry, a quiet reminder that even nature's most delicate creations obey the laws of physics. Carried by gentle winds, the snowflake drifts downward, past mountain ridges, past evergreen forests, past rocky cliffs sculpted by countless winters. The descent is slow, graceful, almost weightless, until finally it lands, not on soil, not on water, but upon an ancient glacier. Here, the world moves differently. The glacier appears motionless, frozen in time, silent, still. But appearances can be deceptive. Glaciers are rivers of ice. They move only very slowly, sometimes a few centimeters each day, sometimes less. Yet given enough time, they reshape entire landscapes, valleys, mountains, lakes, all carved by the patient movement of ice. Our droplet is now locked within that ice, frozen solid, buried beneath future snowfall. Year after year, winter follows winter. Snow accumulates, pressure increases, the layers compress. The original snow slowly transforms into dense glacial ice. The droplet sinks deeper and deeper still. Above it, time continues. Years pass, then decades, then centuries. Empires rise and disappear. Languages evolve. Borders change. Generations are born, live their lives, and are forgotten. Yet deep inside the glacier, our droplet remains exactly where it is, waiting. Scientists have discovered water trapped inside glaciers that fell as snow thousands of years ago. Some ice in Antarctica contains water that entered the atmosphere long before the first pyramids were built, before written history, before civilization itself. Frozen time capsules preserving ancient climates, ancient atmospheres, ancient worlds. Our droplet will not wait quite that long, but it will remain here long enough to witness something extraordinary: the arrival of spring.
At first, the change is almost impossible to notice. Days become slightly longer. Sunlight lingers a little later each evening. Temperatures rise by only a fraction, then another and another. Eventually, the glacier begins to respond. Tiny channels form on its surface. Meltwater appears. The first drops begin moving. After centuries trapped in ice, our droplet finally melts, liquid once more, free once more. The journey resumes. A trickle becomes a stream. The stream joins another, then another. Soon water rushes through newly formed channels carved into the glacier itself. The silence of ice gives way to the sound of moving water. Our droplet accelerates. Its world expands. The glacier recedes behind it. Ahead lies something new. A mountain river. Fast, cold, restless. For the first time leaving the ocean, our traveler is moving with real speed, pulled downward by gravity, carried through valleys shaped by ancient ice, beginning a journey that will eventually lead back to the sea. But first, it must follow one of nature's oldest roads, the river. The river. It begins as a whisper in the mountains, but it does not stay quiet long. The moment our droplet enters the river, everything changes. It is no longer moving slowly through soil, or drifting through the still veins of a tree, or frozen in silence. Now it is pulled into motion, fast, relentless, alive. The river carries it forward through narrow valleys where cliffs rise like ancient walls on both sides. Water crashes against stone, splitting into white foam, reforming again and again, as if the river cannot decide what shape it wants to be. But it is not indecisive. It is simply remembering something older than memory itself: the way home. Our droplet is no longer alone. Millions of droplets surround it now. Some arrived from melting snow, some from underground springs, some from distant rainfall that fell days or years or even centuries ago. All of them moving together, all of them becoming one body, one current, one direction. Downward. Always downward. Gravity is the invisible hand guiding everything now, pulling the river through steep drops, sudden turns, and widening basins where the water briefly slows, as if catching its breath before continuing again. Along the banks, life appears and disappears in flashes. A deer pauses to drink, unaware of the ancient journey flowing past its reflection. Birds skim the surface, breaking the mirror of the water for just a second before the river heals itself again. Fish move beneath our droplet now, silent, precise, shaped by millions of years of evolution designed for this exact current. And somewhere in this living movement, our droplet continues forward, unchanged in essence, yet carried through worlds it could never have reached alone. As the river descends, it begins to widen. Tributaries join from both sides, smaller rivers feeding into the main current like veins returning blood to a heart. The speed increases again. The sound deepens. What was once a mountain stream has now become something far larger, something powerful enough to reshape land itself over time. Rocks smooth into pebbles, soil is carried away grain by grain. Entire riverbanks shift slowly, silently, without witness. The river does not rush, it persists. Hours pass, then days, then an uncountable rhythm of movement that has existed before humans gave names to time. And still, our droplet moves forward. Far away now from the mountains, the landscape begins to open. The air grows warmer. The current slows. The river begins to forget its violent origins and settles into something broader, calmer, almost thoughtful. It curves through plains where fields stretch toward the horizon, where human life begins to appear along its edges, bridges crossing it, towns leaning toward it, civilizations quietly depending on it. But even here, the river is not still. It is always leaving, always arriving, always both at once. Our droplet passes beneath bridges that carry footsteps, vehicles, and entire lives above its surface. It flows past cities that drink from it, build beside it, and sometimes forget that it is not just a resource, but a moving system far older than anything they have built. At night, the river reflects lights from the shore, gold, white, flickering shapes trembling on the surface. It looks peaceful, almost eternal, but underneath that calm surface, everything is still moving. And then, slowly, inevitably, the river begins to change again. The air tastes different, heavier, slightly salty. The current shifts. The water spreads wider and wider until the edges of the land begin to disappear. The river is no longer a river alone. It is becoming something greater, a delta, a widening hand reaching toward the ocean. Channels split and rejoin in endless patterns, like veins searching for their final destination. Our droplet is carried through one of these branching paths, moving slower now, as if the world itself is preparing for an ending it has known all along. Seabirds appear overhead. The smell of salt grows stronger. The horizon opens, and then, for the first time since it began its journey, the river no longer has walls, only openness. Only vastness, only the ocean waiting ahead. The moment arrives without warning. The river dissolves into sea. Fresh water meets salt water. Movement becomes uncertainty for a brief instant as currents collide, mix, and reform into something vast and unfamiliar. Our droplet hesitates, not because it chooses to, but because the world around it becomes too large to define direction. And then it is pulled again, outward, downward, into the ocean. Here, everything is different. The pressure increases. The light fades with depth. Sound becomes distant, softened as if the world above is now a memory rather than a place. The droplet drifts through massive currents that circle the planet like invisible rivers within the sea itself. Warm streams move toward cold regions. Cold waters sink and rise again. Entire systems of motion stretch across continents, connecting oceans that appear separate but are always speaking to each other in deep, silent language. Our droplet becomes part of this global circulation. Sometimes it rises closer to the surface, warmed by sunlight, briefly touched by air again. Sometimes it sinks into deeper darkness, where light glows instead of reflects. Strange organisms shaped by pressure and time rather than light. And sometimes it waits, not frozen, not still, but held in slow movement so vast it feels like stillness. Because in the ocean, time does not disappear, it expands. and somewhere far above, the sun continues to pull water upward once more. A cycle without beginning, without end, only transformation, only movement, only return. And our droplet, small, unchanged, unremembered, remains part of it all.
Deep beneath the ocean's surface, the journey slows even further. Not because the motion has stopped, but because everything has become so vast that movement no longer feels like change. It feels like existence itself. Our droplet drifts through a current that circles an entire ocean basin. It is not random. Nothing here is. These currents are shaped by invisible forces, temperature, salinity, and the slow rotation of the planet itself. Together, they form patterns so large that they can only be seen from space. But inside them, there is no big picture, only flow, only direction, only now. At times, the droplet is drawn upward toward warmer waters near the surface. Here, light returns, not the harsh light of land, but a filtered, shimmering glow that dances through waves like broken glass. Tiny organisms float in this illuminated layer of the ocean, plankton, drifting life forms that form the foundation of nearly every marine ecosystem on Earth. They move with the water, just as the water moves with the planet. And in this thin, sunlit skin of the ocean, life explodes in complexity. Fish gather, shoals twist and turn like living smoke. Predators follow silent trails of vibration and shadow, and our droplet passes through all of it unnoticed, yet essential. Because even here, water is not just background, it is structure, it is medium, it is memory. Then, without warning, the droplet sinks again, down into the darker layers, past where sunlight can reach, past where color begins to fade. Blue becomes black, movement becomes slower. The pressure increases until it feels as if the ocean itself is leaning inward, compressing every particle of space. And yet life still exists here. Strange and patient forms that have never known daylight. Creatures that glow softly in the dark, not for beauty, but for survival. In this world, light is not given, it is made. Our droplet continues its long circulation through these depths. It may take years to complete a single loop. Years before it returns to the surface again, and even longer before it leaves the ocean entirely. Because not every journey is fast. Some are designed to be slow enough to reshape the world. Far above, storms begin to form. Warm ocean air rises, cold air descends, wind gathers strength over the water, pulling moisture upward once again into invisible paths. And somewhere within those rising currents, our droplet begins to feel a familiar shift, a gentle pull, a quiet ascent. Not sudden, not dramatic, but inevitable. It rises through layers of increasing light, through water that grows warmer with every meter, through currents that twist and scatter but never truly lose it, until finally it reaches the surface. The ocean breathes,
Waves rise and fall like a slow heartbeat across the planet, and at the crest of one wave, our droplet meets the air again. For a moment, it exists between two worlds. Below, the vast memory of the ocean. Above, the endless openness of the sky. And then, the sun touches it. Energy transfers silently. Molecules begin to loosen their bonds. The droplet dissolves into invisibility. Not gone, just changed. Vapor again. Free. It rises, higher, beyond waves, beyond storms, beyond the reach of anything solid or known, carried by winds that circle continents and cross oceans without ever stopping to rest, up through layers of atmosphere that grow thinner, colder, quieter, until once again it joins a cloud. But this cloud is not the same as before. It is not over a forest, not over a mountain, not over ice. It is over open ocean, a storm system forming slowly, gathering energy from the warm sea below, and within it, countless droplets assemble, not as individuals, but as possibility. Our droplet joins them, and the cloud begins to grow, heavier, darker, full of tension that cannot be held forever. And far below, the ocean waits, as it always has, patient, endless, ready to receive or release, depending on what the cycle decides next. Inside the cloud, everything is suspended, not still, but waiting, a temporary gathering of what cannot remain separated for long. Our droplet is no longer alone, but it is no closer to certainty. Around it, millions of invisible fragments of vapor drift, collide, and merge in constant negotiation. Some are older than storms. Some were lifted from distant seas just hours ago. All of them are being shaped into something inevitable, a decision the atmosphere will eventually make. The cloud thickens. At first, it is almost unnoticeable, a subtle deepening of color, a quiet dimming of sunlight below. But within its structure, everything is changing. Temperature gradients sharpen, updrafts push upward with increasing force, and tiny droplets begin to find each other more frequently, more permanently. They collide, they merge, they grow. Our droplet is no longer microscopic. It is becoming heavier, more defined, more aware of gravity than it has been since it first rose from the ocean. And gravity, patient as ever, begins to reclaim attention. At the edges of the cloud, ice crystals begin to form again. Even in a world of vapor and suspension, cold still exists. And where cold gathers, structure appears. Six-sided patterns return, delicate, precise, inevitable. Some droplets freeze instantly around microscopic particles of dust, becoming seeds for larger formations. Others remain liquid, held just above freezing, waiting for the moment they can no longer resist transformation. Our droplet drifts between these states, liquid, then near solid, then liquid again, a quiet instability that will not last. Far below, the world grows distant. The ocean is no longer visible. The land is a blurred memory beneath layers of atmosphere. Even sound would not travel here if there were ears to hear it. Only motion remains. Upward currents, downward pulls, collisions that slowly increase in certainty. And then it begins. Not all at once, not dramatically, but everywhere at the same time, the tipping point of the cloud. A droplet grows just large enough to no longer be supported by the air around it. Then another, then another. The balance breaks. Our droplet is pulled downward, at first gently, then faster, then with undeniable force. The cloud releases what it can no longer hold. Rain begins. At first it is soft, almost hesitant, a few scattered drops falling through vast air. Then more join, and more, until the sky is filled with motion again, a downward river forming in reverse.
Our droplet falls through cold air, through shifting winds, through layers of sky it has already passed before and will pass again, but never in the same way, never as the same moment. Below, the land approaches. This time it is different. Not forest canopy, not glacier, not river, but something shaped by everything the droplet has already experienced. A vast plain where water does not linger in one place, but spreads, sinks, evaporates, and returns in endless variation. Impact. A brief contact with Earth. A soft collision that marks another transition, not an ending. The droplet spreads across soil. Some of it is absorbed immediately into underground pathways. Some evaporates before it can settle. Some is drawn into roots of distant plants, beginning their own unseen journeys. And a small portion continues forward on the surface, joining shallow streams that will one day become rivers again, or disappearing upward into sunlight before ever leaving the ground. Because here, more than anywhere else, the cycle is not linear. It is layered, overlapping, always repeating, but never identical. Our droplet has been ocean, cloud, snow, ice, tree, river, ocean again, and sky once more. But it is not the same droplet it was at the beginning, not in experience, not in path, not in the world it has touched. It has passed through forests that breathe, mountains that move, oceans that think in currents, and skies that remember nothing yet carry everything. And still the cycle does not end. It only continues, quietly, indifferently, perfectly. Somewhere far away, another droplet is just beginning its journey, and without knowing it, it is already part of the same story. It begins again somewhere you cannot see, not because it is hidden, but because it is everywhere at once. A single droplet forms, not as a drop yet, not as rain, but as possibility. A gathering of vapor so subtle that even the sky does not acknowledge it at first. It simply exists. High above a distant landscape, air begins to rise again. Warm currents pulling invisible moisture upward as they have done since the beginning of time. The droplet is caught in this motion without resistance. There is no decision, no awareness, only movement. It ascends through layers of atmosphere that feel increasingly unfamiliar,
If it could remember, it would notice the shift, the thinning of pressure, the cooling of temperature, the widening silence between particles of air. But memory does not exist here, only transformation.
Far below, the surface of the world changes again. A different ocean, a different forest, a different mountain range slowly reshaping itself under the weight of centuries. Yet none of it is separate. All of it is connected by the same invisible circulation. The droplet rises into another cloud, but this cloud is older, denser, heavier with stories it has already forgotten it carries. Storms that passed through continents, snow that melted into rivers, rain that once fell in places that no longer exist in the same form. Here, the droplet is joined again, not as an individual, but as part of accumulation, layer upon layer of water suspended above the world like a breathing memory. And once again, the balance begins to shift, slowly at first, imperceptibly, until the cloud can no longer remain what it is. It releases. But this time, something is different. The descent is not into mountains, not into forest, not into river, but into a place shaped by repetition itself. A landscape where water has been falling, flowing, evaporating, and returning for longer than anything alive can remember. The droplet falls, through wind that bends and twists around unseen terrain, through air that carries dust from distant lands, through sunlight fractured into shifting patterns of gold and shadow. Below, the ground rises to meet it, not gently, not violently, but inevitably. Impact. Again. A moment so brief it almost does not exist, and yet it changes everything. This time, the droplet lands on stone, bare, ancient, polished by centuries of wind and previous rains that carry their own forgotten fragments of the same cycle. For a moment, it does not move. It spreads thin across the surface, reflecting the sky in a broken mirror of itself. And in that reflection, it sees nothing new, only what has always been there. Then warmth arrives, subtle at first, a pressure of light that does not push but invites, and the droplet begins to vanish again, not destroyed, not lost, but lifted. It rises from stone into air once more, invisible, weightless, returning to what it has always been beneath every form it has taken. And the cycle continues, not because it chooses to, not because it is forced, but because there is no version of it that exists outside motion. Ocean becomes sky, sky becomes rain, rain becomes earth, earth becomes life, life becomes vapor, and vapor becomes everything again. Somewhere in this endless exchange, the droplet no longer belongs to a single path. It belongs to all paths at once. And still, the world turns, the sun rises, the winds shift, the oceans breathe, and the story continues. The droplet rises again, but this time it does not feel new. It feels remembered. It moves upward through invisible currents, carried by winds that have no destination but always arrive somewhere. Below, the world fades into layers of blue and green and distance. Forests become texture, oceans become movement, mountains become memory, and the droplet becomes vapor once more. It enters the sky quietly, not with impact, but with acceptance, as if the atmosphere had been waiting for it to return. Inside the cloud, everything is familiar, not because it has been here before, but because it has always been here. The droplet joins others again. Some it has never met, some it may have been part of before, but identity no longer matters. Here, everything is temporary assembly. Nothing holds shape for long, and yet something is different. A subtle tension, a pressure building in silence. The cloud is heavier than it should be, not just with water, but with time, with repetition, with everything that has already happened too many times. And still it gathers, still it grows, still it waits for the moment it can no longer hold itself together. The breaking point does not arrive, it reveals itself. A shift in balance, a quiet collapse of suspension. One droplet falls, then another, and then the sky remembers what it is supposed to do. Rain begins again, but it is not the same rain. It never is. Our droplet falls once more, through the same sky, but not the same moment. Through the same air, but not the same world. Below, the landscape is different, not by distance, but by time. A river has shifted its path. A forest has grown and died and grown again. A glacier that once held silence is now only water, remembering its shape. The droplet does not notice, because it cannot. It only continues, downward, always downward. Impact, earth again, but not a beginning, not an end, only continuation. Soil receives it, stone reflects it, roots pull at it again without recognition. Everything acts as if it is new, but nothing is. And still the droplet moves, as it always has, as it always will. Deep underground it flows again, through the same invisible corridors, through the same ancient pathways carved by pressure and time. But now, something changes in tone, not in physics, but in perception. Because if water could remember, it would not see journeys, it would see circles. Everything it has touched still exists somewhere in its path. The forest, the glacier, the river, the ocean, the sky, all of it is still happening, just not at the same time. And the droplet is not moving through the world is moving through it. It is not a traveler anymore, it is the medium through which travel exists. And somewhere above, warm air begins to rise again, calling it back. And now we go into the final stage,
The droplet rises, not for the first time, not for the last, but exactly as it always does, upward, through silence, through distance, through forgetting. The sky darkens into cloud once again, not new, not old, just inevitable. And as it enters the forming cloud, there is a strange feeling, not awareness, not thought, but alignment. Because everything that has happened is about to happen again. The same condensation, the same gathering, the same weight that cannot remain suspended, the same moment when balance fails, and gravity takes back what it always borrowed. Rain begins, and somewhere far below, a leaf waits, a river waits, an ocean waits, not knowing it has already done this, not knowing it will do it again. Because water does not remember, it only continues, and the cycle has no edge, no start, no end, only return. There is no final place, only the illusion of one. The droplet rises again, not because it is chosen, not because it is free, but because this is what it has always done, in every form, in every time, in every world it has passed through, without ever knowing it was passing. Upward through silence, through cold air that does not resist, through invisible layers of sky that separate one moment from another. And then it slows, not physically, but in a way that feels meaningful. Something begins to dissolve, not the droplet, not the cloud, but the idea that they were ever separate at all. The ocean is not behind it, the river is not below it, the forest is not beside it. They are all here, now, part of the same movement, the same breath of the planet. And for the first time, there is no journey, only continuity. The droplet does not rise into a cloud. It becomes what clouds are. It does not fall as rain. It becomes what rain is. It does not enter rivers. It becomes what rivers are.
Everything it ever was is still happening, just not in order, not in sequence, not in time. Time was never a container. It was only how we made sense of movement, and movement never needed us to understand it. Far below, a river forms again. Far above, vapor gathers again. Between them, nothing really changes. Only position, only form, only perspective. If there is a beginning, it is only because someone once decided to call it that. But water does not begin. It does not end. It only continues becoming everything it touches. And somewhere, in a place that is not a place, a droplet falls into a cloud that has always been there, not waiting for it, but waiting for this moment, the one that is always now, always here, always returning. And the cycle is no longer a cycle, it is simply reality, breathing. And now the story ends, but the world doesn't. The words fade, the meaning settles,
and what remains is something older than narration. Rain continues in the distance, not as a story, but as sound, steady, unchanging, patient in a way only nature can be. Beneath it, a deeper tone lingers, a low presence you don't really notice until everything else is gone, like the earth still breathing in the dark. Not loud, not asking for attention, just there, holding everything together. There's nothing left to follow now, no droplet to track, no path to trace, no direction to figure out, only atmosphere, only pressure, only the quiet rhythm of water returning to itself again and again without needing to be seen. And as the rain slowly fades into silence, even silence doesn't arrive all at once. It spreads, slowly, like fog filling an empty space. The journey is over, but nothing has stopped. It has only returned to what it always was. So stay with it a little longer, not to find meaning, but to let everything settle. Rain, distant thunder, a low hum beneath it all. And then nothing new, just the world continuing, quietly, without needing to be followed.